Well, my first thought is that I feel a privilege to be in a room together with so many people who are working on what the ultimate purpose is in creation. And the Gaon of Vilna said, the purpose of man's creation is for a person to transform oneself. We come into the world essentially as physical animals, right? And we have a job to become mention. Right? And I don't think that any place else do you see that intensity of transforming oneself as you do with people in recovery. Well, I think that the reason that there's two aspects of it is that people who have some contact with addiction, whether they are themselves addicted or their family members addicted, will concentrate on what I've done with addiction. Right? But the self-help theme, I think, is a broader one, and it has an application to addiction as well. Because you see, what I've written about in terms of self-help is essentially, and I said one book in 60 different ways, is that a person should have an accurate self-assessment and self-awareness. And I think that what happens so often is that we have a negative self-awareness. There's the Gemara that says that every person has a Yetzer Hara, an evil inclination. And what the Yetzer Hara tries to do is to destroy a person. Right? And that without Hashem's help, he could never overcome that. Now, how does the Yetzer Hara seek to destroy a person? To break him down, to make him feel inadequate, to make him feel worthless. Right? And that's why what I've written about the importance of overcoming that crushing feeling and beginning to feel good about oneself. Right? And obviously, if one does not do good things in life, there's no reason to feel about good one oneself. So you have to realize that I am here to do Hashem's will and to do mitzvahs and to maximize the divine neshama within me. Right? Now, that applies to everyone, and it applies to the addict as well. I don't know what the reason is for addiction. Clearly, many people run to some kind of addiction, whether it's to alcohol, drugs, or to gambling, or to sex, or to anything else, looking for some way to feel good. Right? As though pleasure is going to help them feel good. Well, yes, pleasure will give you a very temporary good feeling. I don't deny that taking a drug is going to make a person feel good for a while, but ultimately it's destructive. So I believe that the self-esteem is an essential part of recovery. So the two things, self-help and addiction, are really not that distant from each other. Well, when it started off, first of all, my message fell on deaf ears, right? And nobody was interested in learning about it. But then what happened was we began getting observant Jews into treatment, right? And it was a trickle, right? But each one who recovered essentially became a messenger and essentially became an agent to help others recover. So it was rare, for example, to walk into a 12-step meeting and see somebody with a yarmulke, right? Well, now, I think that one yarmulke enabled another to come. So what we've had is the resistance started off very strong, and we've just been whittling away at the resistance, and we've made some significant progress. Not enough, but we made some significant progress. You're right. We become more familiar with the solution, with the problem, and there's still some progress that has to be made with the solution. One of the things that's happened is that there's been a misunderstanding of the 12-step programs. There's an undeniable fact that it started off as a Christian group, right?
Right.
And because it started off as a Christian group, many Rabbonim have been opposed to it. You're not allowed to go to AA, you're not allowed to go to OA, you're not allowed, and people have been discouraged from going to 12-step groups. So first of all, yes, that started off as a Christian group, I can't deny that. But does that mean that I can't use it when I can find that every step of the 12-step program, right, can be found in Torah? Right? And if I had to divide a 12-step program, a program on recovery based on Musa, I'd end up with the 12-step program. Right? But there's not been that resistance. The meetings are in churches. Shouldn't go to the meetings, they're in churches. Right? There was a, how can you say God doesn't understand them? You don't have to say God doesn't understand them, say Hashem. Right? The idea that you have to, in the 5th step, share and admit your wrongs to Hashem, to yourself, and to another human being. They misinterpret that as being the Catholic confession. Right? So what happened is that somebody came out with Yisurim on going to 12-step meetings. So, and we're just gradually beginning to get some insight that the 12-step program is not an avodah zarah. I think that we've made progress. There's no question that we've made progress from where we were 30 years ago till now. But I think that we have to keep up the momentum. I think, for example, that it would be wonderful to have more shuls welcome AA meetings, right? Which they don't do, so you still have to go to churches. Right? I think it's important to have rabbis speak about addiction and overcoming addiction through the 12-step program, whether they want to use them. Somebody just came up now with it's an interesting suggestion that we develop 12-step meetings for non-addicts, right, to do with people who are not addicted who still need a lot of self-improvement. And I think that they can get it from learning Sifrei Chassidus and Sifrei Musa. But they have to learn Sifrei Chassidus and Sifrei Musa the way an addict takes the 12-step program. No, an addict, if he's sincerely recovering, when he leaves a meeting, he has to realize, if I deviate from this program, I die. Right? I want a person who learns Sifrei Musa, who learns Tanya, who learns Mesilas Yesharim, to have the feeling, if I deviate from this, I die. And that's where we're missing. Right?
The urgency, the sense of urgency.
Right. It's a good thing, Musa is a good thing. But this morning when I said the bracha Chai Olam Nosab B'Tochenu, right, have to understand Chai Olam Nosab B'Tochenu. This is Moshe Rabbeinu said, Nosate Fonecha Zachayim V'Samovis. If I don't go to Chaim, right, then I'm dead. Right? And what happens is that people don't take that literally. The Rebbe, right, gave 12 suggestions, 12 psukim, 12 mishnahs, right? Why 12? Why not 14? Why not 11? Very interesting that he gave 12. But there's a couple that are trying to organize meetings based on the 12. So I told that I'd try to help them with whatever possible, and we hope to make a video on that. Depends on the audience. It depends on the audience. Even if it's a generic kind of thing, I will try and bring in some of the aspects of recovery. Right? For example, I wrote a Perush on the Haggadah Shel Pesach, right? From bondage to freedom. That was stimulated by a frum addict who came back from Pesach, and said that when his father started saying Avodah Mayinu by the Seder, he stopped his father and he said, Abba, can you ever say about yourself that you've been an Eved? Right? You don't know what it means to be an Eved. I can tell you what it means to be an addict, because all the years that I was in addiction, I was not free. Right? I had to do what the addiction made me do. Right? So I then saw that, you know what? Why are we talking about Yetzias Mitzrayim every day when we put on tefillin, right? Every day in Kishma, right? Every Shabbat in Kiddush, right? Every time, every time we're Yetzias Mitzrayim. Because Yetzias Mitzrayim is telling you not to be an Eved, not to para, and not to yourself. Right? And if you're an addict, you're an Eved to your addiction. And if you've lost control of your anger, then you're an Eved to your anger. Right? And so, even when we talk about generically, I just tried to bring out the ideas of that so many of us have addictions, if not to drugs or to alcohol or to gambling, that we have addictions to our character traits. Right? And that we have to use a method to overcome them. And I find the 12-steppers is still the best method. I think, as I pointed out, spirituality can stand independent of religion, but that doesn't mean that it's enough. Right? For example, one of the items of your spirituality is that there's a component of the human spirit that a person has the ability to look for a purpose in life. Right. What do you mean to look for a purpose in life? I have to have a goal and a purpose for my existence. Right. Now, how did the world come to be? Well, an atheist will say, no, there was no God, and nobody created the world. It happened billions of years ago. There was a freakish kind of thing or whatever, and the world came to being, and it evolved through billions of years. So what was the purpose of the world coming into existence? There was none. It was a freakish accident. You mean the world does not have a purpose? No, the world does not have a purpose. Then it's meaningless for me to look at what my purpose is in a purposeless world. Right? So spirituality means that you have to look for a purpose in life. And I don't see how you're going to find a purpose in life unless you say the world was created. Right? So spirituality can exist independent of religion, right? But it's going to be not enough because you're not going to be able to find the goal and purpose in life, which is one of the elements of spirituality, unless you accept religion. Well, then I think he's missing the boat. Right? For example, spirituality has to do with midas, right? But Chaim Vital, right, who's an authority as great as any other authority, right, says that, asks the question of why doesn't the Torah talk about midas? Torah talks about Taryag mitzvahs, right? And Chaim Vital says because the midas are necessary; they are a prerequisite for Torah. Right? Without midas, there can't be Torah. Therefore, he says, and these are very sharp words. Right? A person must be more careful about his midas than about the mitzvahs aseh v'lo aseh. Now you go tell that to somebody.
That's pretty radical.
Right? And they'll say it's apikosis. But Reb Chaim Vital is saying, right, that if you neglect midas, right, you're neglecting Torah. Yeah? And he says that, for example, hakoyas, that if a person loses his temper and goes into rage, Reb Chaim Vital says it's avodah zorah mamish. It's not a figure of speech. Okay? And based upon that, I feel that if I saw a person who was going into rage, I wouldn't drink the wine that he touched. And he says you have to be more careful with midas than you have to do with midas aseh. Right? Now, the average, very frum person will take an example like this. Here's a person who gets up 4 o'clock in the morning, and he goes to mikveh, right? And he has a shiur. And he learns Mutzah Chassidus, and he davens for an hour and a half, and he has another shiur. Then he comes home, and he finds that his wife has done something that he didn't like, and he screams at her. And he says, he's a Yidat Tzaddik, right? But when he was in anger, right? I said, he's not a Tzaddik, he's a Posher Yisrael, right? I don't care what he did from before until 10 o'clock. Right? If he screams at his wife, he's an Oived Avodah Zorah, right? So my point is, that religion without spirituality is religion without midas. And religion without midas is a travesty. Well, first of all, I found that they have to get educated. They have to learn the facts. They can't be ignorant. And the only way they're going to get the real education is by going to meetings of Al-Anon and Nar-Anon where they have other spouses who've gone through similar things, right? I had to think that they realize that they are not going to be able to change their husbands, right? That they can do something about themselves, and hopefully a conducive environment is going to allow the person to make the necessary changes, but they can't control any. You can't control anybody except yourself, right? But that there is hope for recovery, that they will do what they were supposed to for themselves, that there's great hope that the spouse will follow through with the recovery program for himself.